All right, welcome back to the Kingsway Podcast. Excited you are here. Happy September to you. Happy September.
Happy September.
I feel like this year has stolen the seasons.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like has happened. Because we've been trapped inside, and the little times we've gone out, Missouri doesn't know what it is most of the time.
No, it doesn't.
It's either 65 in August or 105.
Yeah.
And then the last time we were outside was in February. And so... Just saying, like, I really legitimately, like, I'm like, oh, the leaves are going to change soon. When did they get green?
That's true. Skipping a couple steps.
But, yeah, like I said, you know, it's September, trying to keep the train going. We are going to do some context clues today. We got a couple verses to try to check out. I'm excited to kind of jump in and just honestly, I love these context clues. I think they're a fun way to kind of take some verses that everybody's kind of heard of or maybe knows, you know, to a degree. I would say like we kind of do like the backwoods memorizing of scripture most of the time. It's kind of like the pre-Google, pre-spell check Bible verses where we kind of learn it for me is like the NIV 1984 version. And then I like slowly learned
before they realized, you know,
you know,
before they fixed it. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
So, yeah, I'm excited to jump into a couple of those. I know that you have one in Philippians.
Yep.
Is that right? And then I have one from Romans that was a write-in comment from one of our beloved listeners. Looking at you, Mom. So excited to dive into those. Let's just start with this. I have a story to tell that I may already tell in a sermon, but I think it's worth just laughing at the beginning of this. And I want you to laugh with me.
All right.
Because I haven't even told you this, so I will get a genuine laugh out of you. I went to my favorite place and a lot of people's favorite places this last week. Went to the DMV.
Nuh-uh.
Yes. My license expired back on my birthday, which was in August. So I've been driving illegally for the last month. Yeah. So I had to take care of that. So I went in, and I went in actually a couple days ago, and it was September 1st. So I was like, it's almost been a month. September 2nd would be a month. I'm like, I got to do it before, right?
Yeah.
So I get in there, a bunch of shenanigans happens. I never have the right forms. I had to do some things like run around in the building to get copies of something that they have a digital copy of, but they need a physical copy of. So to go back, I passed the test, which I needed my glasses. I only got one letter wrong. All right. I was very proud of myself. And I go to pay for the thing, which the ladies at this time are very aware that I don't know what I'm doing in my life. And,
of course,
everything is falling apart. And they go, it's $27 to pay for whatever. So I hand them my card, and my card expired on the 30th of August. So I was like, great. Evidently, my debit card just expired. So then I look at my wallet and I have $26, Jed. It's 27. So for those of you that haven't put this together, this is the first time in my life that I have been genuinely a day late and $1 short.
Oh, geez.
So anyway, the lady felt so bad for me. She gave me that extra $1. But that's what I'm working with this week. I say that to say, like, that's what I'm working. I'm a day late and $1 short this week. So whatever happens, just give me some grace. All right. And we don't know what month it is. We don't know what season it is. Evidently,
I don't know what's going on.
We're late. It's short. So that to say, let's start with your verse.
Okay.
I think starting with your verse in Philippians is a good place to start knowing where we're going in. Yeah, and we haven't done a ton of research. We do a little bit. I know both of us have some ideas, but more we're trying to talk this through. It's more of a journey that you're supposed to be going on too, because we love to learn. That's kind of the purpose of this channel. And so if you are listening and you're like, what verses? I encourage you to pause the video, look it up, get your Bible out, take a look, read some stuff around, kind of follow with us, track with us. You know, if you're driving, don't do that. But if you're doing something else, mowing the grass, don't do it. But if you have the chance, I think it'd be really good. So what verse did you want to bring?
There it is. Okay, it took me a second to find it. All right, so I came across this one. Obviously, one I've heard before, and but I was reading it for a class. Yeah.
At OCC.
Which is Ozark Christian College. Wearing the shirt, represent. So this is interesting. So the passage before it, I say this just to preface it. I haven't really done much, if any, research on this.
I love specifically. I'm very excited.
The passage before it, I'm working on writing a sermon over it for one of my classes.
You ever write a sermon?
Yeah. I have to write a sermon.
Maybe we'll just put that on the podcast.
You won't want to. You say that now, and then you listen to it, and you'll be like, "Yeah, great job, Jed. I don't think it belongs."
It'll make it to the cutting block. We'll see what happens. It's good practice, bro. Come on. You think all mine are 10 out of 10? Let's not leave that in the comments. All right. So what verse then?
So
Right
it's
afterwards.
Philippians 2:12.
Okay.
It says, "Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only as in my presence, but much more my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you both to will and to work for his good pleasure."
Woo. I mean, that's like, in my mind, if I'm looking at somebody and they're new to faith, I'm reading them that passage.
Yeah.
Like 100%. And I don't even think you need to like know much of the context to be able to capture this, because of how very few passages I feel like are as clear as this one is.
Yeah.
Like I really do think it's.
Yeah.
But I think it's easy to. I see why it would be easy to maybe miss the point, or easy to over analyze it.
Yeah.
But I think that's it.
I mean, I agree. It's clear in like what we're supposed to do with it. I think what could be fun to talk about is just those two, fear and trembling. I think is kind of just like,
there's 1,000 things I want to talk about. I just very quickly, I'm like, I would want someone to sit with this that's new. I would want somebody that's maybe even to sit with this verse. Yeah. Because I think it is something that when you sit with, I mean, I remember reading this for the first time and being scared to death when I heard fear and trembling. Like, I mean, legitimately, I was like, and I'm like, good. You know, like in my mind, I'm like, I should feel this way. Now, why does this verse jump out to you? Like, why is this something like jumped out at you?
There's two things. I think one, and it's all in that phrase, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. You kind of cut that in half. You have work out your own salvation.
That sounds counterintuitive to the gospel.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, it's something. Salvation is a free gift. We're saved by grace through faith, as not of your own doing. Yep. All things that are also
so we can earn
said,
salvation. That's
exactly.
Basically it's just teaching us. Okay, good.
And then second, with fear and trembling. Also, kind of words that, you know, I think in the Old Testament we equate fear and trembling with God, and or even with, you know, you think of when Gabriel shows up to tell Mary, hey, you're going to have a kid.
Yeah, don't be afraid.
Yeah.
He has to say it multiple times.
Exactly.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah. So, but it just feels also kind of odd to be like, wait, what am I terrified of? What's making me tremble?
And then I like the ending. The ending is, I know that's not one of your two, but like that's like one of my, like that thought process of like, hey, this is how like the process is completed. It's almost like taking it through, you know, fruition. And so I want to ask you this, like, what part do you want to jump into too first? Because I know for me, the first thing I think about when I read that is my beloved. Yeah. I don't even get to, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, like I get to it. What chapter is this? Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Yeah.
2:12 and 13.
So this is after the humility. Oh yeah. Cause you're doing that, the prayer of Jesus Paul's kind of lay out there about Jesus.
Exactly. So that, I mean, I feel like all of this flows really interestingly. So we have in 1, Paul talks about saying, he says, I would rather die. Like if I had the choice, like I would say I'm going to die so I can be with Christ, but I know that it's more beneficial to you that I stay. And then says, you know, tells them to like, to work in their faith and to that, like, that's why he's here. He's like to help you with your faith.
And I know that like the book of Philippians, you know, this is where I have to be careful because like I know I've done a lot of research on Philippians. It's probably my favorite book. I've talked about it before on the podcast. Like it's definitely the book that I've done the most research on. It's definitely the book that I feel most confident to try to find context in. So even though I say all that, I'm still learning new things about Philippians all the time. You know, the book of Philippians is a letter to Philippi from Paul, probably better spoken or better said, is written to them while they're being persecuted, while they're going through hardship, but whether it's financial, whether it's physical threat, whether it's just being like economically, you know, brought to the margins.
And he's in prison while he's writing this too.
And then he's writing from a place of that, so you hear it differently. Yeah. Right. So if a person that's in prison is writing to people that are suffering and they're like, well, at least I'm not in prison. Yeah. Like that's kind of the context. And then the structure of the letter is so brilliant because he does this beautiful peppering at the beginning, and then he has this awesome hymn. But they think that's like a hymn or a poem. in the beginning of chapter 2, verses kind of like 5 through 11, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's a hymn that they would know, or that he had taught, or that he had heard sung, or that was being made, that he has kind of at the center. And then afterwards, this therefore, why is the therefore is one of the first context clues, right? It's one of the things you learn. So, verse 12, therefore, you can tell he's going to then launch into, after that poem, kind of what they're supposed to do, which is, later we get like, do not be anxious about anything with prayer and petition, which is one of the things we talked about on here. And so, that being said, I think the context of the fear and trembling and the context of working out your salvation is in the verses directly before this. Yeah. And so obviously I know that's why this verse probably has prominence to you. It's because if you're studying that for a sermon, why would you fear and tremble is probably found in those verses above. And why you need to work it out is probably found in the verses above. And if it's not about working it out with your physical actions or in your content or your character, what is it to mean to work out your salvation? Now, I could take stabs at it, and I'd be curious if you think I'm close. But, obviously my beloved is one of my favorite terms. That is, my beloved is it's a term of language of romance. It's a term of language of the one that I love. The one that's like, the way I've always heard it best explained is like if the father could have yelled at the prodigal son, or written a letter to the prodigal son, this is the language he would have used. My beloved, this lost child, this lost relative, like this language of like, you are the one I want. Yeah. And you are the one I choose, and I long for you. And so like, anytime I see that term, and why I'm referencing, I know I love to, Henry Nouwen wrote a book called The Beloved to his neighbor that was a non-Christian. And his neighbor just didn't understand the gospel, and it broke his heart because he felt like he was the beloved that Jesus longed to rescue. Wow. And it's a brilliant book, really thin, but it's like The Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer. You take a page at a time and you just kind of sit with it. Highly recommend it. But that term has always stuck out. Let me take a stab at work your salvation out, and then I'll let you kind of maybe give what you think the context clue is for fear and trembling, because I'm kind of curious to what your thought is on why those words are being chosen. Work your salvation out. I believe the longer I am in the gospel and the longer I choose to understand the context of what is in the first couple verses of chapter 2 of Philippians, which is the laying out idea that Jesus lays his life down to the point of death, even death on a cross. He gives it up as a servant so that you and I can live. Believing that I am worthy of that gift takes work. That's the truth. And so anytime I hear work yourself out, work towards salvation, or work yourself into salvation, or work towards salvation, that's what it has nothing to do with me physically doing anything. It has nothing to do with my actions, though I think those are very important and it display faith. I think it has everything to do with believing that you're worthy, or that God sees you, or that he values you as the beloved. And to believe that takes intentional work, because most of us see our negative thoughts first. Most of us see our biggest failures first. Most of us see us as a need to get to a place where we deserve it. And it's actually the language that Paul's trying to go, no, work towards salvation. How do you get salvation? By receiving the gift. How do you receive the gift? By being open to receive it. And you have to let it come into your life. Tullian Tavigian, which is needing of grace of any more than anyone else, had a famous saying that I loved. And Tullian had some tough things going on in his life in the last few years, but God still uses his words, which I love. He uses broken people to still do good things. He used to say that I need the gospel to go deeper every day. And he didn't mean that I need to know more. He meant that he needed it to go deeper into the restorative, restoration, salvation idea, that his soul, deepest parts of him, would believe that he deserved salvation. And I really think that's kind of the heart of what that context would be. What about the second time? So fear and trembling then. Yeah. That sounds like grace. What's the other?
I think, I don't know. And again, not looking into, not taking into Greek words or anything, but just thinking. Well, I can't.
Okay, it's true. I don't know what a Greek word is.
I haven't taken Greek or anything, or done word studies or anything on this.
Not yet,
stuff. But I don't know. I think for me, I would I would think that maybe he's just trying to get you to realize what's at stake and realize the stakes of, and not even for yourself, but because I think even too the passage before this, he's encouraging so much unity and in the church, and saying, do nothing, like it's just quoting it, do nothing for selfish ambition or conceit, but merely count others more significant than yourselves. And he says we complete joy whenever we're of the same mind and stuff. So I think I wonder if he's just pushing, of just saying, hey, think of what's at stake if you don't work out your salvation with, if you don't put in the work like you're saying, and do this. It's not just about where you spend eternity, or who you spend eternity with, but it's also about the people around you, and like you.
And I love what you're saying, because I think that brings prominence to the first part. Like I don't think what I said about working your salvation is wrong. I just think it's not the full picture. Because when you put the context of the verse of unity and selflessness and humility, I think it starts to go, okay, so you're working towards that, which is part of your salvation, to recognize your position of needing Jesus, to needing salvation, but then also working it with fear and trembling, because naturally you're disunifying and you're selfish and that you're not going to do this. Like, you know what I mean? And so like, you should be terrified that you're going to mess this up. Like that you're going to cause problems. And I'm sure that when Paul's writing this, like he's also writing from a place of knowing that he's caused disunity, that he's broken things up, that he, still struggles. And we talked about that in 2 Corinthians, that he still struggles of feeling worthy of the salvation that he received because of the things that he's done and had done to cause problems. And so I think he's transferring that, that kind of that like natural, easy way to just get prideful and just go, oh, I got it all now, I'm good. And going like, hey, like I know a lot, done a lot, taught a lot. I still every day wake up a little terrified, a little scared that I'm going to jack it up, that I have messed up. And he chooses to work his way back into believing that he's enough. And he chooses to work back into believing that Jesus is enough, not only for his own salvation, but that his way is worthy of working towards it, that his choice to be humble, because Jesus could have just come down and, snapped a finger and squashed the world and gone on, but he chose to choose the long road, the painful road, the suffering road, to get there, which then of course leads us to the last section. And I know it's not necessarily it's 13, but it says, for it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. It makes me immediately think of the good purpose of the cross looked like defeat, looked like just like, meaningless pain, meaningless suffering, but it had ultimate, purpose behind it. And I know for us, I think that is to will and act us, to trust, to will and to act us, to humble, to will and to act, to serve, to will and to act, to love, when it doesn't feel like it's working. But in the end, we trust the purposes and the purpose of God to do it. And, it makes sense then if you put that all together, that you would, therefore, work this out, let it come into your heart, let it work you towards believing that you're worthy of that and others are. Do it with fear and trembling, that every day you have to choose to do this, or you can jack it up. And then if you do, God will teach you how to live and act, and it will be for a better purpose than your own. I mean, that's the Trevor Message translation, maybe, or that's my my thought process of what we're coming through. And maybe, and I love that about this, because we're not trying to declare that that's exactly what it is, but I think what it is a challenge to any listener. Like, does this reflect the heart of God? In my mind, when I read the rest of Philippians, or think about the rest of Philippians, or I read like that, that's what Paul's trying to come across. And the language there, I'm sure, is fuller and more beautiful if we had time to study the Greek. And there would be depth to it that we probably would miss. There's probably other elements to it, or pieces. But I feel like that's a pretty accurate assessment of what's going on there. And that's a really cool verse, because I think it's an assuring, life-giving verse, but it's also a convicting, hey, be careful, because you do have influence. And then it's also even when you mess up and you feel like you've done the worst, God's still in control, and his will can still, change the world, which is spectacular, because man's best efforts didn't thwart God's plan. Jesus still worked through it, which is my favorite part, probably one of my favorite parts about the gospel and salvation. So, well, that was cool. Again, that was Philippians 2:12-13. Let's jump over to our second one very quick. And I think it ties in with what we just talked about pretty stinking well. It is Romans 8:28. Again, if you're listening, I encourage you to go over there and check this out. As Judd and I have referenced before, we have a very large fan base that includes family members. And so
Yes.
I loved getting this message from my mom saying that she would love to have us talk about this. And my mom's a pillar of faith in our family and has been for a long time. So obviously she's still learning and growing. So she needs me to tell her about this first. That's what this teaches me. No, I'm sure that she knows a little bit of the context to this and would love for us to talk about it. So, 8:28. I'm in John. I need Romans, please.
Let me read this.
Yeah, go ahead and read it for me.
It says, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose." I know other translations say that God works all things for the good of those who love him.
So yours says which word?
It says, for those who love God, all things work together for good.
So mine is the backwards version. We all know that all things God works for good to those who love him. Kind of, and honestly, it gives the other side of it in the references. So it's kind of cool where it kind of flips those, which is according to his purpose. So that's why I felt like going to yours first was kind of cool, because it has this like, work yourself out salvation, fear and trembling, but in the end, he's going to will and act you for what his good purpose.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, look, all things in love work to where? To his purpose. And I find it curious that Paul's letters are so congruent in some of the language that they communicate. Because when I read this, all things work together for those for good for those who love him. That is one of the most difficult passages to swallow when you are in deep sorrow and pain.
Yeah.
It is like, and I read that, I'm like, that's awesome. When I got the grade I wanted, when I got the house, when we had the kid and it's healthy, when everything's going great. But when things are going not so good, and when things have, none of the things look like they're working for good at all. This is a verse that you read and you know, pardon the French, you want to call BS on it, right? You want to be like, no, there's no way bologna sandwiches. It's just not true. And I find that to be the exact heart of what Paul's trying to say. Like, I really think he's trying to test you to believe this. I don't think he's blowing over this like, you know, like a televangelist, you know, like, oh yeah, you do the things and it'll work out. I don't think he's doing that. In fact, I think this is a promise of hope in those dark times. And in fact, I think it's aimed at the dark times. Yeah. More than it's aimed at the good times. Yeah. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Just like those things that he's working together is not like, it's not like, I was thinking we apply often like he's working to things, if that makes sense. Like he's working to make things happen that are good, and not necessarily he's working in something to make it work for good.
Like I heard it said, God's much more excited to make you holy than happy. Right? Yeah. And like that's a purpose in him. Yeah. That a lot of people would be like, I don't like that. Yeah. You know what I mean? But but that's his purpose, or his good purpose is to get you to a place where you live a holy life. And so we interpret non-happy events as going backwards. Yeah. And a lot of times that's just constructive, basically character building. And a lot of us interpret that as we must not be doing the right thing. Yeah. Or God's not here.
It feels like a cop out just because, we kind of, we can jump to it and, or like the Bible school answer, Jesus. But it made me immediately think of like the greatest good that we have, right, is salvation, the free gift. And then, and we got that through something incredibly painful of God abandoning his own son on the cross. I feel like I read it in a book this week. Just something I've been reading for class. It may have been a book called Who Is This Man by John Ortberg. And just reading about how Oh no, it's actually Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering by Tim Keller.
Ooh. That's a good book.
Yeah, it's a good one so far.
Gosh, it's a good book.
But just about how Jesus, God abandoned his son, Jesus, on the cross so that he could come back and rid the world of suffering and pain and all the bad things without having to get rid of us too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's just like, it's just the biggest moment of pain and suffering, like on a cosmic level. And all this darkness is God working in something, in that terrible thing, for good.
And we've talked about that before in this podcast, and it's philosophical thought, but like what growth happens without pain in this world?
Yeah.
Building muscles, discipline your body, having a kid, getting better at a skill. Like, I've tried to learn guitar multiple times in my lifetime. It is a painful process, both psychologically and
it's true.
physically to your fingers.
Yeah.
And, I think there's a part of me that wants the easy road. And so when I read this, it's like works all things to good. I'm like, cool. So like, I'll be perfect. Like everything will come easy when really it's just a promise to never waste pain.
Dang.
That to me is the like, thank you. Yeah. Because if I am in that dark place and I'm in a pain, like knowing that God doesn't waste it, if we turn it over to him and we hand it to him and in love, we live a life that loves him and loves others, I think it gives him permission to do what the cross does.
Yeah.
If we don't give it to him, we don't choose to love him, he can't do anything with it. But if we choose to, it feels very similar to Genesis, right? Adam and Eve, they hide, right? And like they don't want God to really play a role in restoration. In fact, I was joking about this earlier this week with somebody, but Adam gets confronted and he's like, this woman you gave me, like that's his language. And then this snake you put in here, he tempted me, like there's never any ownership about like what your role in it was and like where you're at. And I would even say that goes along with this verse as well. Like some of the pain that's in our lives, it was self-inflicted. And because it's self-inflicted, we feel like we can't give it to God because we deserve the consequence. Yeah. And I would say that that's the whole point of the gospel, is to say that even the bad things that we do that cause pain in our own lives and others is the exact thing that he can work still for good. And in fact, the whole reason that Jesus came to turn it around, and it still can have purpose. Doesn't mean the consequences go away. You still lose an arm if you make a big mistake, but God can teach you and help you and surround you with people that can live and give you a full life through the discipline of that disability. But I think there's a possibility in each of us to neglect the need for restoration through poor decisions and pain. I think that Paul writes this when I know that the Roman road in 8 is there's no condemnation for those that are in Christ Jesus, that all are saved and fall short of the glory of God. That in my mind is the whole purpose of this. Like in your personal pain, in the pain caused by those around you and the sin and darkness and brokenness, God still works for good. Look no further than his purpose on the cross. AKA Philippians 2. Yeah. I mean, so
full circle.
We
planned it. We planned it. That worked exactly as we talked through laboriously and put it all together.
So in my mind, I just when you referenced that and then I knew that Romans, I was like, this is weird. This is so cool. But it's Paul's letters, and you can tell he's focused and he wants the people that are listening to know. And the context of these, like you said, they're fuller. The more you study, the deeper you get. I believe this. The deeper you look into something that God's designed, the better it gets, the more fulfilling it gets. The more you look into something that's man-made, you see the defects, right? You see the issues. And I really feel like when you look into the cross and the gift that it was and the salvation that was offered and truly the way it displayed love, it is, I don't know if I've ever heard of, never listened to, never heard anyone explain a definition of love that fits a better thing. Yeah. And it's hard to believe. It's hard to trust in. That's why there's a little bit of fear and trembling. Yeah. That's why it takes a little work. But in the end, what it is a promise is all the pain has a purpose if you choose to love him and believe. So, good context clues, man. This is fun to look at. I encourage people to check those verses out. Again, Philippians 2:13, 12 and 13, and then Romans 8:28. So great verses. Feel free to go back and check out. If you missed last week, we had Erica and Maurice White on from Africa, one of our missionary sponsors. And man, it was a fun video to be able to chat with them about their last 9 months. And they're such cool people. It really was. And if you did miss that, at least go back and skip through a little bit and hear some of the stories and things that are going on. And
they'll be here.
The 13th.
Week after?
The week after. So the 13th of September, they'll be here for a little bit on Sunday mornings to show us a picture of the church that we were able to help them get and build and talk through some of the stories and things that have gone on in the last year. So,
That's awesome.
Well, thanks again for tuning in. You guys have a great and glorious day in the Lord. We'll see you next week.